Mob Psycho 100 Season 3 aired its final episode, and all I gotta say is after watching the final episode is that it was a perfect ending to the series. That's right, this was the final episode of Mob Psycho for those who didn't know, and I felt that the final episode completed the story of Mob. What I really like about Mob Psycho from seasons 1 through 3 is that Mob Psycho never had a bad episode. I feel like every episode was just as enjoyable, and I feel like every episode had a purpose in the series. Sure, a lot of people enjoy the fights of Mob Psycho and all these action scenes, but what made Mob Psycho really special is that we got to see Mob as a character grow, our main protagonist growing up as time went by, because Mob Psycho is not your typical anime in which we have this protagonist that's OP and is really happy to have these powers and likes to show them off. That's not what Mob Psycho is. Mob Psycho is about a boy who grew up with these powers, who was born with these powers, and instead of being happy, he just kind of wishes he was normal. He wishes that he was a normal kid like everyone else. Sure, he knows that these powers are a part of him, but at the end of the day, all he wants to do is just be normal. Because even though he has these psychic powers that are really cool, and a lot of people, I guarantee you, would love to have those powers, they do have some setbacks. For example, Mob can't really express himself too much because if his emotions increase, so does his powers, and once he reaches 100%, Mob's powers become something else. And it has shown throughout time in the show that whenever Mob turns into 100%, his powers can cause a lot of destruction, and it's very clear as to why Mob doesn't want to have his powers, because he's afraid of stuff like that happening where his emotions increase, and as a result he might not be able to control his powers. But I think what made season 3 more special is that we finally got to see Mob grow. After the events that happened in seasons 1 and 2, we were finally seeing Mob trying to have a normal life. We were finally seeing Mob worrying about his future, because obviously he's still a kid and he obviously still has to worry about those kind of things. Even if he has those powers, he still has to do things that any other person would normally do, worry about their future, what they're planning on doing for their life, stuff like that. But at the same time in season 3, it was very clear that Mob was trying to express himself a lot more. He was trying to show his emotions once again, because it's very clear that for a while Mob was hiding his emotions and what he truly felt deep inside himself. And it seemed that everything was going well. That was until we get into the middle part of season 3, where Mob will have to face Dimple once again. Now Dimple was kind of an antagonist in season 1. It did show that Dimple wanted power and to be seen as a god, but after being defeated by Mob, Dimple became a spirit in which all he would do was follow Mob and see what he's been up to. At first, Dimple's plan was just to wait and get his powers back to attack Mob when he least expected it, but as time went by, he started seeing Mob's struggles and the reason why Mob is the person he is, and he started to understand why Mob acted and behaved the way he did. It was at this point that Dimple felt sorry for Mob, and in some cases even tried to help him out. He tried talking to him, giving him advice on things, and it was very clear that Mob appreciated this help, because it was very clear that this is probably what Mob wanted. Mob wanted to talk to someone about what he was dealing with and what he was facing. Sure, there were people around him that could listen to him and what he has to say, but at the same time, some of these people didn't have powers like Mob, so they don't really fully know what Mob's going through as someone who was born with these powers. Some of these people weren't born with psychic powers like Mob. So it was very clear why Mob appreciated having Dimple around, but it seems that Dimple went back to his old ways, because in season 3, when Dimple gets powers once again, he starts to go back to his initial plan. He gets his powers back once again and starts controlling people to believe his beliefs, and as a result, label him as a god. Of course, this is something that Dimple wanted, but it seems that during his battle with Mob, in which Mob tried to stop Dimple, Mob clearly didn't want to fight him because he spent so much time with Dimple that he knows that Dimple doesn't really want to do this, which at first Dimple denies, saying that this is all he's been planning on doing this whole time. But as the fight continued, it was very clear that Dimple was starting to have second thoughts. It's very clear for Dimple that maybe Mob was saying the truth. Maybe he did just not want to do this anymore, but was just pretending to, because that was his initial goal. And just about when it seems that Dimple and Mob are going to be back together again, there's a new threat, which as a result, Dimple sacrificed himself to protect Mob, because Mob has been pretty much beaten because of the fight that they had between each other. And for a moment, it seemed that Dimple Dimple pretty much risked his life and pretty much gave his life in order to protect Mob from these new threats, which could have been a good end of a character arc for Dimple. And the reason why I'm saying this because there are things that happen during the final episodes of season 3, which don't worry, I will get into it. I will get into it soon. But if this was the end of Dimple, that would have shown just how much Dimple has changed throughout the series, because it's very clear that Mob changed Dimple, and it's very clear that because of Mob, Dimple started to become a different person than he initially was. But just because Dimple was gone, that didn't mean that there wasn't anything else going to happen towards the end of season 3, because as Mob once again is trying to have his normal life and move on and think about his future, the news comes out that Mob's crush, the girl that pretty much Mob has been having a crush in season 1, well, as it turns out, Tsubami is going to be moving, which means that Mob will no longer be able to see her at school. Of course, this shocks Mob, and as a result, he now has a new goal that he wants to do, which is finally confess his feelings to the girl he likes. Of course, this isn't anything new. He's been trying to do this in the earlier seasons, but the reason why he never did it was because he did not have confidence in himself, and he was scared that she was going to reject him. But since she's going to be moving away, Mom realized that he doesn't have that much time left, and he realized that he needs to do this now because there may never be another chance in which he will confess his feelings to her. And this just goes to show you how far Mob has gone, because this was Mob from season 1. He would have made a bunch of excuses and made so many reasons as to not to do this, but it's very clear that Mob now has confidence in himself and wants to actually confess. Not only does he call Tsubami on the phone and tell her to meet him at the park because he has something important to say, he also buys flowers, pretty much showing us how determined he is to be doing this. But the most unexpected thing happens when Mob is at the sidewalk. He sees a cat almost being run over by a car, but luckily due to his powers, he's able to get the cat out of danger. The boy next to him starts to cross the road. However, there's a car with a driver that seems to be sleeping on the wheel, and as a result, Mob doesn't have enough time to quickly react, and so he pushes the boy, and as a result, he gets run over. And this is the most unexpected thing to happen, as I wasn't even expecting this sort of thing to happen towards the end of the series, but it did happen. Mob gets run over by the car, but it seems that something triggered Mob's powers when this all happened, because then as a result, Mob starts going berserk and his powers start going out of control, showing us the amount of destruction he's causing just from his powers just being berserk. And as a result, this is the climax battle of Mob Psycho 100. It's not Mob going up against a villain that's powerful, no, it's the people around Mob trying to stop him because his powers are causing mass destruction. And what makes this battle terrifying is that this is something that Mob himself was fearing something like this would happen once again, in which he would go berserk and lose control of his powers, and that is being the case during the final battle with Mob, in which Mob's powers are going so berserk that no one is able to stop him. Not even the people who have psychic powers themselves is able to stop Mob, showing us just how powerful and dangerous Mob is when he's unable to control his powers. And one interesting thing that happened during this whole situation is that Mob's brother and Reigen himself believed that the reason why Mob went berserk is because he was holding his feelings, his true feelings and his true emotions all this time inside of him, and thus it seems that something triggered it, which is most likely the car accident, and as a result everything just went loose. And with that, it kind of makes sense as to why things are the way they are right now, and most likely is a case of Mob pretty much still having a hard time revealing his true emotions and his true feelings. It seems that even though he did progress and showing his confidence and showing some emotions, it still seems that Mob was still holding a lot of things back. But as a result, there was one person who was able to defeat Mob and prevent him from going even more berserk, and that was Reigen. That's right, out of all the characters of the series, Reigen was the one to be able to control Mob. Well, Reigen and Dimple, because as it turns out, Dimple's fine. It seems that he's actually okay and still alive, even though in previous episodes it seemed that Dimple pretty much was going to be a character that we will lose in this season. But as it turns out, Dimple okay and was using Reigen's body to stop Mob, clearly showing us that Dimple still cares about Mob and wants to make sure that he's okay. But that's not the only thing that made the last few episodes of Mob Psycho great. It was Reigen talking to Mob once again, revealing to Mob that all this time Reigen was nothing special. All those times where Reigen told Mob that he was a psychic as well and that he had powers as well, and the reason why he wasn't revealing them to them was because he was too powerful, that was all a lie. We finally got to see Reigen fully admit admit to Mob that he wasn't anything special. He didn't have powers just like Mob, and he apologizes to Mob for lying this entire time. And I think that just goes to show just how much of a big character development Reigen has got throughout the series, because in the beginning of the series we find out that Reigen was a con artist and was using Mob for his own benefits. But as the series went on, you can tell that Reigen does care about Mob, and in this scene it clearly shows that Reigen just now wants to be honest with Mob and wants to apologize for all the things he made him do. It's very clear that Reigen regrets pretty much using Mob for his own benefits, which is nice to see. But what's also really good to see was after this whole situation, Mob decided to go to the park and confess his feelings to Tsubami. And unfortunately, Tsubami rejects Mob. And at first it seems that Mob is fine, but when he gets to Reigen and Dimple, he starts to cry, showing us that Mob is actually showing his true feelings. And another thing that I like about this scene is how Reigen tries to support and cheer up Mob after him being rejected, just showing us how much of a good person Reigen is. And after all this, it seems that everything goes back to normal and everyone starts doing their everyday things. And then the series ends with all the characters that we have seen throughout the series all in one room getting ready to surprise Reigen, because as it turns out it's his birthday. And of course they're gonna throw some comedic things, and as a result that's the end of Mob Psycho, with the last scene being Mob laughing, showing us that he has now been able to finally show his true emotions. And that's the end of Mob Psycho 100. So overall, I am going to miss this series. I think the ending was spectacular. It showed us everything that needed to be shown, how Mob was able to become a different person, how Mob was able to finally show his true emotions and not keep everything inside him, the characters as well, how they got their character developments. Overall, great series. And even though Mob Psycho has ended and we're probably not going to see anything more related to Mob Psycho, this has probably been the best ending I've seen in a while in an anime. We don't usually get these a lot. Usually some anime endings turn out to be really unsatisfying or not really that great, but that's not the case with Mob Psycho, because it not only started strong, it ended strong. Not only that, but I also have to give Studio Bones a round of applause, because it's very clear that they were passionate about this series. There wasn't any time in which you felt like they were lacking creativity or effort. No, it's very clear that every episode had a lot of passion, and I think that's the reason why Mob Psycho turned out to be such a great anime, because not only did it have a strong story, but also had a good studio that actually did care about the series. And with that, that's pretty much the entire video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.